Hello, this is Addie Banks, and welcome to Hope from History, where we share the truth about Black American history. We focus on early Black entrepreneurs in American history to inform and inspire. I always say that if all you know about Black history is slavery and Jim Crow, you don't know Black history. How do you define a business titan? Business builders who reach giant reputations, names like American businessman John D. Rockefeller, industrialists who revolutionized the petroleum industry, Standard Oil Company that was so large that it was broken up by the Supreme Court for being a monopoly, Andrew Carnegie, industrialist who founded the Carnegie Steel Company in 1892 and by 1901 dominated the American steel industry from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. J.P. Morgan, a banker who bought out Carnegie Steel and renamed it U.S. Steel. Cornelius Vanderbilt, who accumulated great wealth from railroads and shipping businesses. George Pullman, who made his fortune designing and building sleeping cars that made long-distance rail travel more comfortable, and who hired former slaves as Pullman porters, projecting many into a new economic standard of the middle class for Black Americans. But did you know there were Black business titans as well? This show is about Titan Samuel B. Fuller, who built a multi-million-dollar conglomerate of companies that had sales of more than $10 million a year and offices in 38 states in the 1950s and early 1960s. Samuel B. Fuller, born into poverty in 1905 in Monroe, Louisiana. His sharecropper family worked hard, requiring Fuller to drop out of school in the 6th grade to work the farm. At the young age of 9, Fuller began selling products door to door, and this started his lifelong adventure in selling that would propel him into the realm of ultimate entrepreneur. When he was 15, his family moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and 2 years later his mother died, leaving 7 children to fend for themselves. Fuller was 17, and the story goes that although eligible for government assistance called relief, they rejected this assistance, seeing it as shameful charity, and forged ahead working to support themselves. In 1928, perhaps in search of a better living than he had in Memphis, Fuller hitchhiked to Chicago and found work in a wide range of menial jobs, eventually rising to become manager of a coal yard. Later he found employment as an insurance representative for Commonwealth Burial Association, an African-American firm where after 4 years he was promoted to a managerial position. Although he had a secure job during the Depression, Fuller nevertheless struck out on his own, preferring freedom to security. While at Commonwealth, Fuller borrowed $25 using his car as collateral to launch his venture into entrepreneurship. Therefore, with his 6th grade education, a desire to succeed, and a talent for sales, S.B. Fuller invested his $25 in soap from Boyer International Laboratories, manufacturers of Jean Natal Cosmetics and H.A. Hair Arranger. He bought and repackaged products and sold them door to door. His success inspired a greater investment of $1,000, and in 1929 he incorporated Fuller Products. Keep in mind, this was the beginning of the Great Depression, and Fuller was launching his own business. Fuller used the door-to-door selling model to expand a little-known line of cosmetics. His business grew, and he began producing his own cosmetics and allied products, which became nationally known. Fuller established a line of 30 products and hired salespeople primarily on Chicago's South Side, where a small concentration of Black people lived. A substantial number of Black American families had moved from the South to Chicago during the Great Migration, and they became the customer base from which Fuller Products would see tremendous expansion. The business had grown from a small office space above a store to a small factory, also located on the south side, to a manufacturing company in 1939. His Chicago plant included such products as face creams, lotions, perfumes, soap, deodorant, hair care products, and a full line of household necessities. The Fuller Company eventually marketed a diverse list of products, including men and women's clothing. Fuller became one of the city's most prominent black businessmen. Determined to expand his business, in 1947, Fuller acquired Boyer International Laboratories, the white cosmetics manufacturer that was teetering toward bankruptcy. In an effort to avoid criticism and possibly boycotts from whites, who were loyal to Boyer products, Jean Natel Cosmetics, and H.A. Hair Arranger, the transaction remained secret. This was full Jim Crow America in the late 1940s. Fuller's customers for these products were primarily in the South: Atlanta, Birmingham, Montgomery, Dallas, and North Carolina. S.B. Fuller was fully American in his perspective that he said, quote, "It doesn't make any difference about the color of an individual's skin. No one cares whether a cow is black, red, yellow, or brown. They want to know how much milk can it produce." During the 1950s, Fuller was probably the richest black American. His cosmetics company had $18 million in sales and a sales force of 5,000 people, 1/3 of them white. Fuller had created a multi-million-dollar company with sales in black and white communities and successful door-to-door salespeople. His training techniques guided others in establishing multi-million-dollar businesses of their own. Throughout the 1950s, S.B. Fuller was known as a master salesman. According to the November 1957 Ebony, the attractive, modest, and unbelievably energetic Fuller had a charming and magnetic quality about him. Quote, "He cajoles, questions, lectures, coddles, and spanks his dealers with words that have come to be a gospel to Fullerites." End quote. The formula for his success, cited in the November 1975 Ebony, is given in Fuller's own statements. He said, "The door-to-door salesman is the backbone of today's economy. At Fuller Products Company, there is only one race, the human race. A man doesn't have to have a lot of degrees behind his name to earn $10,000 a year." S.B. was a motivational genius. Fuller held spiritual meetings for his door-to-door salespeople and published weekly bulletins, distributing them to independent dealers so that his salespeople throughout the country always knew his doctrine on selling and living. Furthermore, Fuller held annual meetings for his employees that allowed him an opportunity to honor them. For example, when Fuller and his staff met in Chicago's Palmer House in 1957, his top 3 salespeople were awarded automobiles, and 24 other salespeople divided a jackpot of more than $3,000. Most of his administrative staff were college graduates. His employees, who were called Fullerites, included George Johnson, later owner of the well-known Johnson Products, and Joe Louis Dudley, owner of a multi-million-dollar business in Greensboro, North Carolina. By 1959, Fuller had built a $250,000 12-room dream home in Robbins, Illinois, where he and his wife lived alone. The suburban showplace was replete with maids' quarters, 14 telephones, imported Italian tile floors, Indian wool carpeting, and Japanese raw silk draperies designed especially for the Fullers. Business soared after the acquisition of Boyer, and by the early 1960s, sales peaked at $10 million, with 60% of his customers being white. Fuller had a line of 300 products and employed 5,000 salespeople, 600 of whom were on direct payroll. His employees were black as well as white. According to the November 1957 issue of Ebony, he inspired his black employees by saying, "Anything the white man can do, so can you. Don't ever feel the way is closed to you because you are a Negro. All you need is faith in God and faith in yourself." Fuller established 85 branches in 38 states. The astute businessman decided to diversify his investments further and bought an interest in J.C. McBrady and Company and Patricia Stevens Cosmetics. He became a major shareholder of the Pittsburgh Courier Publishing Company, the country's oldest black newspaper, and also the New York Age and the Pittsburgh Courier, the largest circulated black newspapers serving black audiences in Chicago, New York, Detroit, and Pittsburgh. Additionally, Fuller invested in real estate, owning a real estate trust in New York City, the buildings housing branches of his businesses in various cities. He owned Chicago's Regal Theater, the city's counterpart to Harlem's Apollo Theater for black entertainment. He owned the Fuller Guarantee Corporation and Fuller Philco Home Appliance Center. He bought South Center Department Store and renamed it Fuller Department Store. This was a full-service store that offered mail-order sales to countrywide customers. Fuller invested in farming and cattle interests. Fuller's politics and civic activities. Fuller was a leading black Republican, although he always had an independent streak. He promoted civil rights and briefly headed the Chicago South Side NAACP. Along with Birmingham businessman A.G. Gaston, he tried to organize a cooperative effort to purchase the segregated bus company during the Montgomery bus boycott. He told Martin Luther King Jr., quote, "The bus company is losing money and will be willing to sell. We should buy it." King was skeptical of the idea, and not enough African American people came forward to raise the money. Despite his belief in civil rights, Fuller's emphasis was always on the need for African American people to go into business. In 1958, he blasted the federal government for undermining free enterprise and fostering socialism. He feared that it was doing the same thing today as was done in the days of Caesar, destroying incentive and imagination. He argued that wherever there is capitalism, there is freedom. Fuller served as president of the National Negro Business League for several terms in the 1940s and 1950s. During his lifetime, Fuller divided his time between his company and other professional and civic activities. During the 1930s, black businesses founded the Chicago Negro Chamber of Commerce and later included older, more established companies such as Park Sausage, Metropolitan Sausage, Supreme Life Insurance Company, and Baldwin Advertising. Their motto was, "For your economic emancipation, patronize your own." Fuller was president of the organization until 1947. By using marketing campaigns and participation in community events and parades, they guided a continuous campaign for self-sufficiency through black business support. Fuller himself consistently supported black businesses. In the 1950s, for example, when Johnson Products was burned out of its small cosmetics operation, Fuller enabled George Johnson and his company to use Fuller's facilities in the interim. That Johnson was a competitor was irrelevant. In 1960, Fuller was chairman of the Pittsburgh Courier's board of directors. By 1962, he also had become a licensed Baptist minister and later became an associate pastor of St. Andrew Temple of Faith, Truth and Love Baptist Church. At some point, Fuller was also head of the Southside chapter of the NAACP and the first black member of the National Association of Manufacturers. During President Eisenhower's administration, he raised contributions for the Republican National Committee. He also contributed generously to various charities and scholarship funds. In 1963, Fuller was the first African American inducted into the National Association of Manufacturers. During his acceptance speech, he stated that, quote, a lack of understanding of the capitalist system and not racial barriers was keeping blacks from making progress, end quote. In an interview that same year with the U.S. News and World Report, he said, quote, Negroes are not discriminated against because of the color of their skin. They are discriminated against because they have not anything to offer that people want to buy, end quote. Fuller's comments were taken out of the context of his speech and reported widely with seeming chastisement of blacks rather than the real purpose to understand the capitalist system, strive to build businesses that hire blacks and obtain economic and political independence, all things that would propel blacks into economic equity with other races, religious, ethnic groups in America that support each other. Jackie Robinson, the former baseball player in retirement, wrote a scathing rebuke of Fuller that was read and then, under no certain terms, challenged by those who knew Mr. Fuller and attended the meeting and heard the entire speech. But major national black American civil rights leaders were outraged, and they let it be known with their criticism of Mr. Fuller. They reacted angrily, and some called for a boycott of Fuller products. Some civil rights advocates boycotted his stores and products. The company lost $8 million because of that, said Gwen Goodlett, a spokesman for the company. Bad to worse. Fuller was devastated by these severe company setbacks and responded to the outrage saying that the comments were reported out of context. He cited decades of behaviors that showed his support for civil rights, scholarships from his own funds, and thousands of employed workers, black and white, making good money that was the real indicator of his positions, rather than believing a portion of his speech taken out of context. Fuller would be boycotted by blacks and whites. Remember his majority purchase of Boyer International Laboratories during the height of segregation in 1947? And his statement about the color of the cow not mattering? Well, it mattered. Fuller's business investments began to decline in the 1960s, in part from the increased attention he was receiving nationally that sparked objections from the White Citizens Council on learning that Boyer had been sold to a black man. They attempted to destroy the company by enlisting Southern whites to boycott the company. Drugstore chains owned by whites removed the Boyer line from their shelves. Since 60% of the company's sales came from whites, the boycott had a devastating effect on the Fuller Products Company bottom line. Jean Natal products soon had no market at all in the South. Although he believed that black producers should sell to white customers just as whites sell to blacks, he attempted to move this market to the North for whites and blacks, and to blacks in the South. He decided to sell the line to a New York liquor dealer, but he reneged on the offer to buy the Jean Natal line, further devastating Fuller's enterprise. This created a domino effect. Attempts to invest his money in Fuller's department store, formerly the South Center Department Store on South Side Chicago, left him financially overextended, and he had to sell this enterprise. In late 1968, Fuller divested himself from his publishing concerns, and he sold the mortgages held on much of his real estate. The one thing that has never been disputed about Mr. Fuller is that he was an honest man. He lived a Christian life, and he expected the same from others. In 1964, the Securities and Exchange Commission charged Fuller with selling unregistered, high-interest promissory notes on his business. He pleaded guilty in court and was placed on 5-year probation, as well as being ordered to repay creditors $1.6 million. This seemed contrary to the behavior of the man that I had researched and is not covered in online articles that I found. But from the book about his life, S.B. Fuller, Pioneer in Black Economic Development, written by his daughter, Mary Fuller Casey, I learned that Mr. Fuller needed money to continue building his business, and the banks would not loan him what he needed. Therefore, he sold securities at high interest rates of 10 to 25% to individuals. The law allowed this without registration if under a certain time period for repayment. When the government accused Mr. Fuller of violation of the securities law, his attorneys argued their understanding of the codes, but were ruled against. Mr. Fuller agreed to plead guilty to 1 count, and 5 counts were dropped against him. Fuller Products Company declared bankruptcy in 1969. In an attempt to reestablish himself, Fuller revived his business in the 1970s, reorganized under the federal bankruptcy laws, and by 1972, the firm reported $300,000 in profits. Still based in Chicago, he had centers in Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York, Newark, Richmond, Greensboro, Washington, D.C., and Cleveland. By 1975, Fuller's company manufactured 60 products, including cosmetics and other beauty products. In 1976, Fuller, as a result of failing health, asked his top distributor, Mr. Joe Dudley, to move to Chicago and become president of the Fuller Products Company. Dudley, who had worked with Fuller in the past and was already operating a booming cosmetics business in Greensboro, North Carolina, where 3 years before he saw a 400% profit, teamed up with Fuller to develop a $100,000 business in the next 10 years and to perpetuate door-to-door selling. By 1978, Dudley had become president of the Fuller Products Company, and in 1984, Fuller Products Company was purchased by Dudley. S.B. Fuller's life was an illustration of Black success and self-help. His company gave inspiration and training to countless aspiring entrepreneurs and future leaders. He was a humble man with challenges that would have defeated most men: race, poverty, a 6th grade education, and a speech problem. But he made a covenant God. If you give me the wisdom to get out of poverty, I will spend my life passing it on to others. And he did. His words of wisdom: if you could save money as well as we can save souls, many of our troubles would be solved. Find a need and fulfill it. Take what you have and make what you want. Know that there is hope from history. Thank you for joining me, and stay tuned for more great American history.